Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. It's good to see all of you. My name is Stephen Fraley. I'm the co-chair of the graduate program in fashion photography here at good old SVA. Erik is our second annual visiting artist to the program. And I just want to thank him for his involvement. We're very grateful for him being involved in what we're doing and for him to be here tonight. I also just want to give a special shout out to our friends who are visiting from the London College of Fashion, who have just arrived and will be with us for the rest of the week. So it's good to have you guys here, and we're looking forward to all kinds of great things happening. So my role standing up here is to introduce the people who you probably know very well what their accomplishments are. But nonetheless, please allow me to mention that Vince Aletti, the distinguished photography critic, was the recipient of the Infinity Award in 2005 by the International Center of Photography for his critical writing. He has curated exhibitions at White Cube in London and White Columns here in New York, and has contributed to catalogs regarding the work of Peter Hujar, Saul Leiter, Eddie Slimane, Richard Avedon, and dozens of other publications. He has been the photography critic of The New Yorker since 2005, and before that, he was at the Village Voice for 20 years. His writing on photography appears regularly in Photograph magazine and Art Forum. Vince is a faculty person in this graduate program in fashion photography here at SVA, and we are honored by his participation in our program. Erik Madigan Heck is a regular contributor to Harper's Bazaar UK, New York Magazine, the New York Times Magazine, and the New Yorker, and he's represented by IMG William Morris Endeavor. He has shot campaigns for Neiman Marcus, Etro, Tom Brown, and Kinzo. Erik has also been honored by the ICP with an Infinity Award in 2015, and a monograph of his work will be published very soon by Timms and Hudson and Abrams in, did you say April? March. So without any further delay, please welcome Vince Aletti and Erik Madigan Heck.
Thank you. I realized the last time I was seated on this stage having a one-on-one conversation, it was with Saul Leiter, who proved to be difficult, who was charming but ornery in some ways, and almost resisted questioning. So I'm hoping that you'll be a little more easygoing. And so I'd like to start with, well, first I should say that I started buying British Harper's Bazaar, which I basically paid no attention to for years, because you started working there. And I think you really transformed the magazine.
Thank you very much.
They've given you huge amounts of space. And he's in this latest issue, 42 pages. And you said that previously they'd given you more than 60.
Yeah.
So it's impressive.
Thank you very much.
And you really hold the page.
Thank you.
So, but let me go back to some history.
Yeah.
Some things that I don't know. Where are you from? And how did you get interested in photography?
So I'm from Minneapolis. I started photographing when I was 14. My mother gave me a camera as I used to be really into music and DJing, and I would spend hours in my bedroom kind of huddled over my turntables, just like not talking to people, you know, just listening to music. And I think she wanted to bring me like back out into the world.
Smart way to do it.
Yeah, I was becoming a total like music hermit. So she used to give me a roll of film once a week, and we'd go out on Sundays and shoot just a roll. And she would say, you know, you can shoot anything you want, as long as you shoot 36 exposures, we'll be done.
What an interesting exercise. Did you walk around or take a car? Or?
We would drive in her car, and she would have me point at things that interested me. She'd stop the car, we'd get out, I'd take a picture, and then maybe I'd walk a little bit, take another picture. And it would last maybe 2 hours. I would shoot a roll of film. in the beginning, it was kind of a nuisance. It was like I could be DJing to myself. But then it just became like a routine. You know, it was like Sundays I would look forward to doing this activity, and in the beginning it wasn't. It was very mindless. You know, it was just kind of like going and getting a cup of coffee, but with the camera.
Did you show the work to somebody?
No.
Did you make prints when you came back?
So then I enrolled. You know, this is freshman year. I enrolled in photography, and I would go to the darkroom, make the prints every week. But it was really innocent. It was just like it was a hobby at this stage. And then there was some point that year where it just clicked, and I still kind of remember knowing it was like, you know, meeting a part. You know, it's like meeting your wife or something, where you're like, oh, I just know.
Something happened. Something clicked.
Yeah, and
was it a picture or was it sort of?
I don't think it was a picture.
Experience?
I think it was just like I looked at it differently after whatever moment that was. I remember looking at the picture and being like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I know for sure. You know. And it was probably like a mundane landscape or something, like not exciting necessarily, but I remember knowing, you know, without any doubt that I was going to be a photographer.
So, but you didn't go on to study photography, from what I understand.
No, I went and studied, I studied politics and philosophy. My parents didn't think that they didn't think that I could make a lot of money at photography, so my dad was concerned about, well, you know, he's a concerned father. He was like, I want you to be successful. I want you to have
As a philosopher?
not as a philosopher.
That's not exactly a profession either.
No, it's not. I went to a liberal arts school. It was a private Catholic school, and I went there with the intention of studying political science, and I was also studying philosophy. But for me, the whole time I knew I was going to be a photographer. So it was like I was appeasing my parents. You know, it was like.
And were you taking photography sort of on the side?
I was taking it at the school as well.
Where was this?
In Rhode Island.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it wasn't RISD or no?
No, it wasn't RISD. It was the only school I applied to, and that wasn't in New York. And after September 11th, my parents were like, "You're not going to go to school in New York." Which, I mean, I'm a teenager, so I was still under my parents' wing.
Right, and finances, I assume.
Exactly. So this was my safety school that I had applied to. I'd never been to Rhode Island in my life until the first day of school. And I showed up and I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's really beautiful. And it was an amazing political science program, but it wasn't, you know, the arts program was tiny. So like a little closet.
But it was still something you could do on the side.
Yeah, I was still like making darkroom prints, and you know, my whole career until 2007, I only shot black and white. Yeah.
That's kind of shocking.
Yeah. Yeah, I hated color photography. Any color photography I saw, I thought was unlookable. Yeah.
That's so well. Maybe I should ask this question now. How did you? I mean, that's a major transition because I think of you as the color photographer in many ways, and so much your work is so much about color.
Yeah.
How did that?
Well, I think for
change?
me, like I learned photography by going to Barnes and Noble in Minneapolis and reading, you know, Henri Cartier-Bresson, August Sander. Harry Callahan. You know, I read my way through the history of photography by going to the bookstore and like not buying the books, but sitting in the aisle for 2 hours and just looking at every single picture. And for me, you know, I was such a purist with photography. I felt like it had to be black and white, and you know, the subject matter was street photography and serious portraiture. And
this is what you were doing as well.
This is what I was doing. And, you know, my introduction to color photography was like William Eggleston, who I didn't care for at all. And my favorite photographer was Harry Callahan. And his work, when he started doing color photography, I thought it was actually really bad. And so I kind of viewed it as like the demise of Harry Callahan was the introduction of color. So
Did you change that opinion along the way?
No, I still believe that.
Oh.
I think color work is really, really bad. And he's the best, to me, he's the only photographer that's made a lasting impression,
Okay. So then how did you transition into color? I mean, because like I said, I feel you're so identified with it now.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see that your book actually includes some black and white work.
Right.
But I don't really think of you that way.
Yeah. Well, the thing was, I grew up painting. My mother's a painter.
Oh.
And I always wanted to be a painter, but I was a terrible painter. I don't.
I'll take your word for it.
You can take my word for it. I don't have the patience, and I'm not technically able to express myself with a paintbrush, but I always thought of my pictures as paintings when I was making them. I would try to create scenes in my mind that I may have already seen from a painter before, or trying to imagine it as a I don't know, more of situations that I had seen in paintings as opposed to photographs. But I always felt like I had to make them as black and white images, because to me that's what photography was. It was the history of photography had been shown to me as like hierarchical in black and white.
Right.
And
but yet you.
So at one point,
Okay, go ahead.
I decided if I'm going to do color, I want it to just be about the color, and I really want to start creating the paintings that I would like to make as paintings, but as photographs.
Oh.
And so it was a choice. It was like, if I'm going to do color, it has to be so colorful that it's not photographic.
Oh. That in a way that you're not treading on that old tradition.
Well, to me, color photography has to be about color. Black and white photography is about composition, right?
Okay.
And graphic elements, because you've taken the color out of the equation, so you can focus on all the other elements, but if you introduce color, to me, color is the primary thing. So it might as well take over and become
right.
all powerful, So when I started doing color photography, I really wanted to do processes that could lend themselves to making it more saturated. Like Sarah Moon, I used to live in Paris, and Sarah Moon was a photographer that I really admired when I was in high school.
Oh.
And she was experimenting with these dye transfer processes, and like Paolo Roversi was doing his color work that I also admired. And so in the beginning, I started shooting with large format Polaroids and tried doing different, like experimenting with actually physical processes to see, because at that time, digital photography still wasn't.
And so what time are we talking about?
Like 2004, 2005, 2006.
You're out of college.
Wait, no.
No?
No, 2006. Sorry. Bad at math.
Well, it's not exactly math, but go ahead.
Sure.
But so are you out of college at that point? I mean, are you on
Yeah.
your own?
Yes.
Are you making a living?
No, I'm in Paris. I'm studying.
What are you doing in Paris?
I'm
How
studying.
did you get to Paris?
I took a plane.
Okay.
I took a plane. I woke up in Paris. No idea how I got here. I didn't speak French.
Was it just a romantic?
I turned
spontaneous thing?
21 in Paris.
Okay.
It wasn't very romantic.
That's the only reason you need.
I woke up with a bad hangover.
Okay.
Wondered why I was there. I was studying politics at the American University.
In Paris.
And I was also taking classes at Parsons when they had a school there.
Oh.
They might still have a school there. I don't know.
Okay, well, so that grounds you a little bit.
Sure.
All right, I needed that. Thank you. So you're not entirely fancy-free, but you're in Paris.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm in Paris as a student trying to, soak in what Paris has to offer. It seemed a lot more approachable to be making fashion pictures in Paris.
Well, that's
in
I'm
terms of
curious
like,
about that transition then,
sure.
to making what I assume is personal work
Yeah.
that probably you weren't doing anything with, to making commercial or thinking about fashion. What
Right.
made you want to or think that you could do that?
Well, so I've always, I always look at things and I'm like, I could do that better.
Okay.
Or I could do it differently in a way that, I've, at the time, so I left Paris, came back to New York, and I actually started graduate school at Parsons.
Oh.
I went straight into doing my MFA, which in many ways I should have waited, but that was fine. I started graduate school and I started a online magazine, which, believe it or not, there weren't any online magazines in 2007. It's really hard to imagine because time is such a weird thing. But in 2007, there was a thing called Fly DVD, which was fashion films. There was Show Studio, Nick Knight. There still wasn't Style.com, right? You still had to go to First View to look at fashion shows. And the magazine publications hadn't transitioned online yet, so there wasn't Days Digital, there wasn't any of this. So at the time, the idea of putting an online magazine was actually kind of cool.
Radical.
I'm not going to call myself radical, but in a way, sure. And it was like, my idea was really a way to get my own work out into the world, but also to make a magazine without any budget, right? Because all you need to do is buy a website and then call people. And so for the magazine I started was basically my work. I would call designers and I would ask them if they'd want to be included in this publication. I would shoot it. So a designer like Christian Lacroix would send me 12 dresses from Paris. I would shoot them, and then I would curate a selection of other art that I thought paired well with the fashion.
Oh.
So like paintings by Lucian Freud or Anselm Kiefer, or a poem by whoever.
Okay.
Sorry, my poetry knowledge is not up to par, but it used to be. And I would just create something that was really organic, and it was just what I was looking at the time. And a lot of my references are very old-fashioned. It was also before Fabian Baron took over Interview again, and the whole merging of real art and fashion. That didn't start really happening until 2008, 2009. So it was like my own wanting to like go to the Met Museum and merge that aesthetic with Belgian fashion and with, electronic music and all these different things into one place.
But it was essentially your work,
Yeah,
other sort of influence, kind of mood board kind of material.
totally.
And did you involve any other photographers or?
I tried to, but it was really about me.
Okay.
And it was, I hate to say it, because it was like I wanted to get my work out there. It was also a very coy way of like making myself more important than I was, if you immediately include yourself next to Lucian Freud and Anselm Kiefer.
It's putting yourself in a context that is sort of ambitious, but
Sure.
that reflects your way of thinking and what you're looking at. So it makes sense. And how long did this go on?
So I did it for 5 years.
Really?
Yeah. And we would make boxes of prints and we'd sell them.
We.
Well, I say we. It was mostly me. But I had friends. My friend over there, Anna Corinne, who helped me. I had friends in different places who would kind of lend a hand. But we would print boxes of prints at Parsons, actually, like in their computer room and in their dark room. And then we'd sell them at other criteria in London, Barney's here in New York, and 10 Corso Como in Milan, Colette in Paris. So we do 10 boxes, and then each box was just, it was extremely expensive. It was kind of like a collector's thing.
Interesting.
And that was how I transitioned, because that took me from graduate school to getting known on a broader scale to where people started hiring me. That was kind of the...
So that's what I was going to ask.
But I didn't make it for that reason. I made it just because I really wanted to publish somewhere, and nobody would publish me. You know, it was kind of a necessity. It was like, well, if you guys aren't going to publish me, I'll just publish myself.
But to get to Colette and 10 Corso Como, they had to have bought you on some level. They had to be interested in your vision.
Yeah, well, we had great press, or I had great press from the beginning. Like the first issue we put out, the New York Times ran in print in the arts and leisure section, front page, one of my pictures, and a blurb that said, "The world's most expensive magazine."
Oh.
Which was a great tagline in terms of like getting people's attention. But first of all, it was not true.
Oh.
It was extremely divisive, because a lot of people were like, well, fuck that guy.
Yeah, right.
You know, like, he's obviously a jerk. I don't want anything to do with it. And then other people were like, oh, that's crazy. I can't believe you would pay $7,000 for a box. And in reality...
Literally?
Yeah, I mean, they were like $7,500. But you would get 20 prints. You know what I mean?
By an unknown person?
Well, no, it wasn't just me. Like, we would make prints of other artists, you know, with the gallery's permission. So it was like, you would get a print by Anselm Kiefer, and you'd get a print of mine, and you'd get a print of, you know, Jamie Isaiah, who's a photographer.
So it was a collection.
It was a mix. It was a mixture of the issue, which I actually thought was a really good price, to be honest, because you could take them out to have 20 pieces of art in your home. Anyway, they focused on the price because that was a great headline.
Yeah.
But that launched us into the, you know, many people's awareness.
I'm surprised that I didn't rush off and
you don't know everything.
Raise some money. Well, and so let's talk about how that actually led to editorial work, or was that the next step?
Well, so I used to be really ambitious when I was in my 20s, and I would write letters to people I liked, and which now I think back and I'm like, that's kind of creepy, but it works, you know? And I actually
like getting letters.
They're nice. So at the time, in the very beginning, Anne de Mielmeester was one of my biggest, I loved her fashion since I was like 15.
Okay, well, let me stop you there.
Sure.
Because, I mean, a lot
There's
of...
a point to it, yeah.
No, a lot of photographers, a lot of fashion photographers have zero interest in clothes and fashion. They could care less. And I'm interested that was part of your interest as well.
Totally. Well, I was really interested in fashion separately from photography. You know, like my interests in photography were purely photographic, like street scenes, portraiture, nothing to do with fashion photography. And then I was really interested in fashion, and specifically like the Belgian scene.
In the kind of avant-garde design.
Yeah, like Anne de Mielmeester, Dries, like the Antwerp 11, Comme des Garçons, what was happening in Japan. But I was interested in fashion as sculpture. So when I would look at it, you know, I was never interested in fashion as a cultural scene, you know. I really liked designers who could introduce a new silhouette that was sculptural and made you think on a level that was beyond just like, that looks cool, you know. And there are very few. Unfortunately, a lot of them have retired or are soon retiring. But for me, Anne de Mielmeester was the best. And when I was in Paris, I would go up to Antwerp. It's like 4 hours on the train. And I would go like hang out in her store and like hang out, like put myself in places that maybe she would come.
So you
know?
were a total fashion geek on
For
some
sure.
level.
For sure. But I was like a white kid from Minneapolis, you know, like I'd wear like an Ann shirt, but like with terrible shoes. You know, people would be like, what are you doing? Like, I don't know. Somebody help me. Because like I'm, you know, inherently I'm not like a cool skinny Berlin kid who can like shave his head and just look cool. Like, and that's not, you know, this is as cool as it gets. Like J. Crew cardigan. So anyway, I ended up making some prints, some really large prints, and I got Anne's personal address from a friend. And I like rolled them in a tube and I sent them to her. And she wrote me a letter and was like, we have to meet. Like, I love what you sent me, and like the sentiment was amazing. And we ended up having this like really personal relationship kind of off the bat, which is really strange because she was like a untouchable figure in my mind. And she ended up kind of becoming like I wouldn't say a mentor, but somebody that I would check in with in like once a year. And she would, we would do projects together. Some she would ask me to do, and others I would say, I want to shoot your clothes just because. Through her press agent is Michelle Montagna, who's like one of the most powerful people in fashion in terms of like avant-garde, hard to get in the door of fashion. So she, when Hyder started designing, she started representing Hyder Ackerman. She hired me to shoot Hyder's first men's collection in Italy. And then through that, I mean, it was very organic. Like it literally started with a letter with me being like, "Dear Anne, I love you." Put it in the mail. And then through those just organic conversations, it led to shooting editorial eventually.
Plus, yeah. So, what were your first editorial experiences like? I mean, this Hyder Ackerman, was that just for the house?
It was for the house and for Pitti Umo, and I don't know where they were published in various places. My first like proper editorial commission was actually in the New York Times Magazine, and it was a portrait of a Boston businessman.
Oh.
It was great.
Yeah.
I was so excited. I was like, the New York Times Magazine is, still to me, the pinnacle of where you can publish.
Well, because they have a great photo editor who really puts you in a great context.
Yeah. And she gave me an assignment where I was like, how am I going to do this?
Yeah, how did she?
But they always do that to me. She gives me assignments that
they throw you
I'm
curve.
Like, why can't they just give me? But no, I mean, anyway, it was great that my first assignment was like a very buttoned up businessman because it was really hard, and it made me. You can get lazy in fashion, and it's nice to go back to non-fashion publications because you have to switch your mind into a different mode. You're shooting for a different audience. You're shooting for the world as opposed to a fashion audience, which is very specific.
Well, it interests me that you do portraiture as well.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to that.
Sure.
Because I'm still curious about how you jump-started the fashion photo career, especially if your first assignment was a portrait for, at the Times.
Yeah.
Did she at some point have you do fashion as well?
No. So I started with portraits, and then that year, Neiman Marcus, I self-published a book.
Oh.
And I sent it out to 1,000 people,
Not me.
I didn't know you, Vince.
Excuse me. Yeah.
So anyway, it wound up on the desk of Georgia Christensen, who's the creative director of Neiman Marcus. I think one of her friends might have bought a book and gave it to her. And she looked at it and she was like, great, let's hire him. And she hired me for the Art of Fashion campaign, which historically is a really important campaign.
Yeah.
Started with Richard Avedon and Annie Leibovitz. Every major photographer has shot this campaign that I know of.
And impressive to be sort of brought in as an upstart.
Yeah, but it was also terrifying because it was like my first real job, and it was a huge job. And they buy 20 pages in Vogue. It's like the insert. So anyway, that was kind of like my first foray. Like I didn't shoot editorial. Like people did not want to publish my work. I'm telling you, I would literally like knock on. I'd like go to Dazed and Confused and be like, I'll do it for free. I'll like pay you. Like no.
Thank you, but
yeah, I mean, my career was super inverted in terms of how it came to be.
It started with ads rather than an editorial?
Kind of, yeah, which is strange because normally you do a ton of editorial work so you can get advertising.
Right.
But yeah, it didn't really work that way for me.
Well, especially to jump into that art of fashion thing in the context of so many important people who've come before you.
Yeah.
It's an incredible springboard.
Yeah, it was. I got very lucky. But I had met with Georgia before she hired me. Like she flew to New York and she wanted to see who I was, and this is not meant to sound arrogant, but it was really because I think she could tell like I truly like the clothing. Like I want to celebrate the clothes. And I think that was really a selling point, especially for advertising, because my work isn't really it's not about sex, and it's not about being sexy, and it's not about being cool. Like so many of the pictures that I want to make are about fashion as sculpture, And if you're trying to sell clothing, that's the best way to
really
do
want
it.
to see it.
I mean,
yeah. Well, it's I think one of my real interest in fashion photography is the fact that it is functional at best, and it serves a purpose of actually showing you the garment.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people could care less about these days, but I really like that you do have this sense of the clothing and the picture, and of really sort of paying attention.
Thank you.
So clearly that started from the very beginning, or it started before you were photographing.
Yeah, well, because fashion was such a separate interest, I mean, I always admired fashion, like I said, as sculpture. And so when I did, in the beginning when I was a teenager, when I looked at fashion photography, it was like boobs, It's like,
Well, what?
Sorry,
What is this? Is this the 80s we're talking about, or 90s?
90s.
90s.
Okay. And I was looking at GQ and I was looking at magazines that my dad was getting, not necessarily Vogue Italia, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wasn't seeing the fantastical imagery of Mizell or like Tim Walker, what have you. But my notion of fashion photography was like this really cheap industry that was kind of like 2 steps away from, the sex club down the street.
Oh.
And I didn't
Well,
want...
clearly you were looking at the wrong things at that point.
Maybe. But I don't know. I mean, was I? I mean, there are a lot of... Anyway, my point was, my notion of fashion photography was really a vehicle to sell sex. And I admired fashion, and I didn't want to denigrate it with...
But how could, wait, let me just pull you back a little bit from that. Because were you not, somehow in the course of, your interest in Callahan and the other photographers, seeing Penn and Avedon and Helmut Newton and...
I was. Yeah, I definitely was. I wasn't so interested. I didn't think Penn was that great. I mean, he's obviously great.
Okay.
Hey, it's just my opinion. It's just my opinion. I found a lot of the like 60s, 70s, 80s fashion photography to be a little bit boring. I really like Deborah Turbeville. I thought she was
That's
great.
interesting because I was
Yeah.
going to ask you about her.
Yeah.
The more I look at your work, the more I thought about Turbeville
Yeah.
because there's something very personal there, something kind of odd and engaged in the figure and.
Well, it's also that she was one of the first photographers and female fashion photographers, but to really celebrate women in a different way. I mean, she was showing you a side of a woman that wasn't made to be a sexy object or like a personality. They
Right.
were just kind of like, in many ways, regular women put into more regular landscapes like Russia in these kind of beaten down scenarios, which to me was nice. Like,
So it's as much about her choice of models, her way.
for sure, like her, 100%.
Because I mean that's partly I think also why I thought of her when I was looking at especially this, that do you get to choose the models to some degree?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, in most of my projects I do with like Bazaar, there are practical reasons why we use certain models. Like it might be that budget allocates, we have to get them all from one agency, or we're shooting in London and we only have these 5 to choose from because the rest are out of town or whatever. But yeah, within that context, I do, for sure.
Because they're not like they have a different kind of personality. They don't.
Yeah.
They're mostly not the big sex bomb models.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me. It's like I tend to stay away from models that are very well known now. It's really hard to put your stamp on somebody who you're constantly bombarded with by photographers who have much bigger, ad space.
Oh, okay.
Whatever. I don't know what I was doing with my hands. This means nothing. And also my pictures aren't sexy in a physical and literal way, so it doesn't make sense for me to shoot like Cara Delevingne or what have you. I mean, for me, it's like I'm not so interested, but I'm also not so interested in people in my work. You know what I mean?
Oh.
Like for me, it's more about the fashion, it's the landscape, it's the color. So putting a recognizable figure is almost distracting and almost takes away from the work for me.
So ideally the models sort of recede into the scene and the clothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you don't even see their face. That would be my preference.
Okay.
Half my book, there's no faces.
Well, while we're talking,
Yeah.
we should start showing a little bit of this project.
Yeah.
What you're showing right now are the opening pages of this book. Why don't we show?
Yeah. Sorry, get all the water. So, this is.
A nice format, by the way.
Thank you. It comes out. Oh yeah, we already said that. Anyway, this is a book I've been working on for 2 years. And we'll show you, this is the pagination here. Feel free to.
Do what?
I don't know. Also, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask.
Well, we're going to
Maybe.
do that at the end.
Just kidding.
Right. Don't say a thing.
So the book starts out, the book is based on color. So it starts out in blue,
Oh.
and then it goes to green. It's like a color wheel.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
You didn't even figure
No,
that
I
out.
didn't pick that up.
I know.
I mean, I certainly absorbed the sense of color. And I guess while you're showing this, let me jump to the question about landscape.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the opening images are pure landscape.
Yeah.
Or and a lot of a lot of your work does involve people in the landscape, often like deep in the landscape.
Yeah.
So, and where does, I mean, this is very Monet.
Right.
A lot of these are really quite beautiful.
These are actually ponds. The surface of a pond that's been multiple layers put on top of each other.
Oh.
Yeah. In various places too. Like some of these are shot in Florida, some are shot in Minnesota, some are shot in France. Yeah.
So, is there a landscape painter or photographer that interests you, that kind of feeds into this?
I mean, I grew up looking at all the Impressionist painters. For me, I love Degas' landscapes. My favorite painter has always been Vuillard. And I mean, I spent 6 years trying to figure out how he made his space so flat. You know, how there's no dimension between the person in the landscape and the object in the foreground. And that was like my quest to like make a Vuillard painting as a photograph. And I started with landscapes, and then for me, for me, the most important thing has always been using color to like flatten space.
Oh.
Yeah.
And certainly there's this sense of flowers and print and this profusion of flowers especially.
Yeah.
But texture and all the kind of light and color that comes into all this.
Yeah, these were, I mean, in many ways too, like a lot of the black and white photography I was doing in the beginning was landscape, and I've always loved landscape photography. And now I feel like I have to put a person in it to like justify making it. So I try to make them as small as possible. They disappear, and then I can publish it because it's a fashion picture.
Oh, okay. So it fits into the context.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I still shoot a lot of landscapes on my own and kind of put them aside, and with the hopes of, you know, a book project being able to merge. Again, like on the left, that was Harper's Bazaar. And then on the right was just
How much of this is manipulated digitally or however later?
So I don't manipulate structural things, but I do the color in post.
Oh.
Right? So I think about it, like I try to describe it as like a painting, because you start out with the base, which is just the picture as it was, raw. And then I do layers and layers of color. And they're built up like a canvas would be.
Oh.
So I don't put people
You don't
into
move
places
things
that,
around.
No.
Okay.
But the color is dramatically different, you know? Like,
Those reds.
yeah, I mean, if you were on drugs, you could maybe see that.
Okay.
But if you aren't, it was pretty green, you know? However, there are things like this. That was really a red bush, and it was sunset, so it looked pretty much like that.
Okay. And the light on her is so gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is I only shoot natural light. I don't light anything. So
that's pretty amazing.
it's a waiting game. Got to wait for the sunset. We were actually driving around in our car. That's Guinevere, who's a good friend of ours. And I was like, Guinevere, we're going to Vermont. You should come with me. Let's make some pictures. And we were driving around Vermont, like driving for the light, you know, kind of chasing the light. And then I'd be like, get out of the car. There's a red bush. And she just ran in front of the bush and click. That was it. Like that was a dress for John Battista Valli. The book was, the book is 10 years of work, and it was kind of bizarre, no pun intended, to put pictures together from 8 years apart and start to see that, you know, you take the same picture over and over and over and over and over, and you always think that you're doing something new. But then you see that you did it 6 years ago. And
well, here's to go back to that one.
Yeah.
This is one of those situations where you're barely showing the dress.
Right.
But it's so, the atmosphere is very heavy and seductive. But there's like only the littlest bit of real information there.
Well, that wasn't a commission. This was just a picture that I wanted to make.
Okay, that's what I was wondering,
Yeah.
whether there's...
Although that's not to say that if it was a
couldn't
commission,
get away with that.
yeah, that they would probably still run it. But
But it's such a beautiful image.
thank you.
So I wanted to go back, though, to Turbeville and mentioned Paolo Roversi,
Yeah.
both of whom, now that I think about it, are quite, you know, I love their use of color. There's a similar sensibility. Was there anybody else that struck you as somebody that you could relate to in fashion?
Well, I mean, you know, in the 90s, at the time, you know, I had a great admiration for Peter Lindbergh, especially because the work I was making was all black and white film. And I looked at Peter's work as very much like a segue for me into fashion. But I didn't want to make, you know, work similar to his.
And you're not, in a sense, one of the things I realize, you're never really doing narrative.
Well,
That I
like
can
overt
remember.
narrative, like a Maisel story about.
Right, like a story.
I mean, not really. You know, I never liked narrative because I didn't buy it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I buy it completely.
Yeah. No, I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
A lot of people do. I don't.
I mean, if it's well done. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people who try to do narrative that just don't know what they're doing. But
Well, like in graduate school, my Joe is here. He was a professor of mine. But everything would be in series, right? You were unable to produce work that wasn't in a series. You had to have a conceptual framework.
was that annoying?
Well, I just don't buy that premise. You know, like I think a photograph should be successful on its own, and I don't think it needs to adhere to 10 other images that look like it.
Well, I totally agree that each image in a sequence should be successful and be able to stand on its own. But I also like the idea of telling a story, or finding a way to link those things up.
I mean, well, if you're going to tell a story, like to me, somebody like Dwayne Michaels is great.
Right.
But if I want to read a story, I'm going to read a book. And I'm not going to look at a picture. There's a better medium to do a story. It's literature.
Think that Peter Lindbergh is a good example of that kind of not necessarily narrative, but a sort of through line of something he's trying to tell.
I mean, I guess, but not really. What you have a
bunch of
film light in a corner,
Right.
and you have a tarp, and you're somewhere in the desert. How is that a story?
And maybe
It's
there's
like-
an alien there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, yeah, it's like, you put the story together in your head in a way.
yeah.
But you're
I
right.
think narrative is a word that allows people to escape making good pictures.
That's a good quote.
Quote me.
So, but without dealing with narrative,
Sure.
you create these. I think to do a 42-page sequence,
Yeah.
that where the pieces don't feel, they're all quite different.
Yeah.
All your settings are different. You're indoors, you're outdoors, and it's like sustaining that. I think is really an interesting and difficult thing to do.
Thank you.
How do you go about that, or is it just a matter of like,
I think it's just adrenaline because you have to make, those shoots we have to do 40 some odd designers in 2 days on location
oh,
when it's 20 degrees
uh-huh,
and there's no heat. And I think a lot of it is like crisis management.
yes,
And I think I do my best work when I'm given really difficult parameters, And those bizarre shoots, they're really difficult because you're having to get through so many different situations and try to find some cohesive glue, like you said, which is the narrative, I would describe it differently. I would say it's just, how do you make 40 really good pictures in 2 days?
uh-huh,
And I don't know, for me, it's normally the atmosphere is the glue, like trying to make it less about the people and making it more about the environment.
right.
So that the people just become part of the environment. And then the environment is the story, if you will,
Uh-huh. Well, I wanted to ask you about beauty,
Yeah.
since I was in the conversation that you have with Susan Bright, right?
Yeah.
In this book, you say at one point, beauty is one of the most powerful forces that surround us, yet we are taught not to talk about it.
Yeah.
And because I think beauty does seem to be one of those subjects that is difficult to handle in art school, or and that's, I think, where people are taught that it's something that shouldn't be.
Right. It's like the word you shall not speak.
But
Yeah.
which I've never believed in either. I always think that that's, it is what people should aim for.
Right.
But it has become a difficult topic. And how do you get around that? Clearly, your work is very focused on beauty.
Yeah. Well, I always said the rule of thumb for me was, would my mom like it? Right? Like, I think when you talk about beauty,
Well, first we need to know a little bit more about your mom. Is she a tough critic?
yeah, I mean, she's a tough critic, but I'm just using that as like a general statement. Like, would your mom like it?
Okay.
I don't know your mom, but
My mom would like it, yes.
but I guess my point in that, with fashion work, so much, with any industry, industries are insular, and people, we all can get caught up on thinking about specific things that we're taught to think about for our industry. Let's just talk about fashion. And I think when I talk about beauty, beauty is something that affects everybody. It's something that, it's an experience that any person's had in their life. I'm not talking about beauty as described as makeup. I'm not talking about beauty in different specific senses. I'm talking about beauty on a larger, like, experiential way, right? And so for me, we don't have conversations about beauty because it's like talking about religion. It's an impossible thing to really talk about.
To pin down.
But to try to talk about it, with my work, I want the image to be for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what I'm trying to talk about with beauty, is that I would like your mom or the guy on the street or somebody in a different culture who isn't, versed in what Givenchy is and what Harper's Bazaar UK is, to have an experience with the image or a reaction with the image emotionally, and have, beauty to me is an experience. It's like you have an object, you have yourself, and that thing in between, that's the beauty. The object itself isn't necessarily beautiful to everybody. People get people get really held up on subjectivity, but I
right.
don't think that's the conversation. Conversation is that middle place.
Of how you respond.
Yeah, and I do believe there are objective universal things that people react to. Color, certain ways figures are described. You can look through the history of painting and see threads popping out. And for me, those are more important than, I don't know, making an image that seems to be of the now.
Oh. Well, I mean, it interests me that you're, in a sense, there's something very classical about your work. There's something romantic about it. I mean, I really think there's some like pre-Raphaelite things going on here. And yet at the same time, you're also really interested in this very avant-garde clothing design that's
Right.
That's very intellectual in some ways,
Yeah.
and appeals to a very kind of narrow audience.
Sure.
So I mean, having those two things play together is, I think, what makes the work interesting. It's not sort of just a sop.
But they're interested in beauty as well. It's a different articulation of it.
Right.
But you know, like in Andy Milmeister, Hyder Ackerman, or Raf Simons, their clothing is their way of expressing their articulation of beauty, and they're very poetic and they're very romantic. You know, it's the aesthetics are different. But when I shoot Andy Milmeister in a setting with little boys that look like Mario Giacomelli priests, you know, you're taking something out of the Belgian context, and you're celebrating it in my own viewpoint of beauty, and it's, you know, it kind of becomes full circle. So I think there are ways because also when you're shooting a collection of clothing, like the designer's giving you, it's like handing over to you to do. It's like, here's a gift, and you do with this what you will.
Right.
When I look at their clothing, you know, I imagine it in a different way than I'm sure, you know, they intend it to be. But that's the exchange. That's the beauty.
Well, and you are interpreting it in a way for us, for the world, on some level, finding a way to put that across and make it come to life on some level.
Yeah.
Are there any particular designers
that.
that you've been talking about in this sequence?
Yeah. So, for example, sorry, I'm just gonna. This was a series for Tom Brown that I did for his A magazine. This is in Scotland, in the Isle of Skye. This was an example of like taking his collection and we took the collection from New York, we flew to Scotland, we shot it, and we put it in his A magazine curated by. And he just said before I left, he's like, just make it about death.
Oh.
I was like, great.
Okay.
Easy. And so we went and we made these pictures. Let me see. I think I passed a couple. Yeah, it's on the left.
Oh. Uh-huh.
You know, this is in like the northwest part of Scotland, on an island that is one of the oldest places that you can go.
Oh.
Expect to see a dinosaur. And we just made a bunch of pictures that, to me, were about like almost crossing over, you know, going up into that abyss and saying goodbye. These are, I'll just keep flicking through. This is one of my favorite pictures. I can still say
I know it's on the
I have
back,
a favorite.
on the back of your book, right?
Yeah, this is for Valentino, and we shot this at the Botanical Gardens in the Bronx.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, often, I mean, your use of pattern on pattern on pattern is really compelling, and comes across, repeatedly in the book. But then this kind of, strong color really stands out. I do want to go ahead to the Gucci campaign.
Yeah. So I'll get to.
But it's good to see there's also toward the end of this, these just more simple, like silhouettes
Yeah.
that seem to me to go back to your talking about sculpture.
Yeah. For a while, I've been doing these just the back of people, which I prefer.
Oh.
No face.
So why is that? You said that before, but because you feel that the personality is distracting, or?
Yeah, I feel like the pictures to me aren't about people. I'm not interested in people necessarily. I also don't think photography is the right medium to talk about people. There's such better mediums.
Well, that's a whole other conversation.
No, I mean,
I will not have that conversation.
I'm just
right?
stating facts. I mean, you have literature and you have film.
Okay.
So, photography.
Let's
Anyway.
not go there, really. Augustander,
I-
excuse me.
Can I just get you
DNR
riled
best.
up and you can say something you regret tomorrow?
And this kind of this graphic group is really interesting to me too.
Yeah.
It feels like you sort of subtracted a lot of material in order to get these images.
Yeah. For a while, it's trying to figure out how to really eliminate the person while having them still be this central focus.
The body.
The body.
Well, it does really play up the garment,
Yeah.
the shape, the silhouette, everything that sort of just, it makes it, in a sense, a pure fashion image.
Yeah. I also just think, we see faces everywhere, all the time. See too many faces.
Is that a problem?
Too many faces.
Let's not get into this again.
All right. I'm just going to keep.
Right. One of my favorite areas is portraiture.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're doing that as well. So you have to deal with faces and that and all that comes with it.
Yeah.
So, I know that you.
Yeah, but a lot of the
I like to
portraiture
turn-
I do is trying to make them into a sculpture,
Oh,
We can talk about that.
okay. I thought the one on the last, this black and white one is really striking.
Mm-hmm.
Is there's still a body in there?
Yeah, so the top was the headpiece. It was actually a wig, but we took from the shirt and put it into the hair,
Oh,
right? So this became,
it's a collage in a way.
yeah, this was the one series where we actually started manipulating scale and like replacing pieces.
Okay.
And then, yeah, here's some black and white. So then, yeah, it goes into Gucci, which is,
Let's talk a little bit about this. This is the Gucci menswear campaign that you said will not actually be running.
no, it's not,
It's not a campaign.
no. So I
wish it was.
I do too. Yeah.
Because I'm a little tired of their advertising. But I find this really
Vince
nice
said
group.
that, I didn't say that. So I was going to do a residency in Venice this fall, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And before I went there, I was trying to think of designers that I would love to shoot while I was there on local Venetians. And so I wrote to Gucci. and they brought down the menswear collection before, like right after they showed it. They got on a train from Milan, brought it down to Venice, and we scrambled. So we were trying to find people on the street to like wear Gucci, and it wasn't working. I was walking around Venice is such a weird place. I don't know if you've been to Venice.
I have been, yeah.
I thought I was gonna love it, and I got there, and I was like, I have to be here for 3 weeks. And eventually, I met the University of Venice. I met some teachers, and they introduced me to their fashion program. And I walked in, and it was like 5 rooms full of kids. Every single kid looked amazing. Just incredible. Like, you couldn't have cast a better crowd of people. And so the stylist that I was working with, a good friend of mine, her name's Kat, we walked around, and she's way more outgoing than I am.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, I'd be like, that person. And she'd walk, be like, over there, they'd stand up, and we'd like take their picture, write down their email. And we organized a shoot over 3 days where we like took these kids around Venice, and they were just wearing the collection, and we just shot a bunch of pictures.
Oh.
And it was amazing too because they're fashion kids, so they really appreciated the
really
clothing.
liked it.
They're like, oh, that's how they made that, and I mean, so it was amazing to see it on people who actually
Appreciated it.
yeah appreciated it.
Well, it's also, I like this because there's something not exactly snapshotty, but more spontaneous about this.
Yeah.
It feels relaxed. It feels like, and it's, it has a nice feel to it.
Well, these are all friends, like, who hang out outside of school. There's an authenticity just to their relationships that you don't have when you're working with models.
Oh.
Like these two are best friends in real life. And it was more just telling them to go about their day,
And
And I was kind of a fly on the wall.
hanging out with them.
Yeah. This is actually the teacher. Her name is Deda.
Oh.
That's in an elevator. This is, the actual image is a little bit bigger. I don't know if it's just that I'm old now, so I think young people look amazing, but there's something just, like
It's
you
true.
walked
They
in.
do have a certain thing going on.
Yeah.
But also, I guess, see, I find the Gucci clothes kind of ridiculous.
For sure.
But, and so somehow it's not exactly down to earth here, but it feels more believable to me.
Yeah.
That people actually could wear these clothes.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like they were the perfect casting.
And they were enjoying it, yeah.
Like they look like Gucci guys, but less polished.
Well, I guess anytime you put on those stupid glasses, no one's going to look. Anyway, the glasses are sort of thankfully absent in most of these pictures.
So we like this. I mean,
Right.
come on, you can make up a better Gucci
Right, moment.
/ Wes Anderson.
Right.
I mean, he really looks like that at all times.
Oh. This is nice too. I like
Yeah, this is, I think, one of my favorite pictures.
Well, so I guess it interests me that you find color in the landscape. And,
Yeah.
Clearly you're looking for these settings, but the the color of the boat, the brickwork, everything really is part of it. It's like, I don't know, I'm thinking of Funny Face too, where everything seems like it's colored deliberately to work with, for that moment in the fashion picture. Or Antonioni movies where everything is usually painted so that it works. But I really like your way of finding and using ready-made color.
Yeah, well, it's finding what's there and then bringing it out more.
Is this the woman again?
Yeah. Yeah.
She has a dramatic look.
Yes, very. I mean, they were a little bit looser.
Looser.
The pictures were looser than my other fashion work, but it was kind of an experiment. It was also nice for me to take a break from what I've been doing, and go back to kind of what I was doing when I was in graduate school, like at the beginning, which was this. It was like calling up a designer and being like, "Hey, I really want to shoot your stuff," and
So does this encourage you to sort of incorporate this looser style into other work?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like, I've been thinking a lot about recently also going back to black and white for, I don't know, a month or so, maybe 2 months. Yeah, I get bored real easy, so I'm always trying to figure out ways.
That's a useful thing in a fashion photographer.
Getting bored?
Yeah, but constantly like egging yourself on.
Yeah.
Finding, knowing that you have to do something different next time.
I know, there's not a lot of monetary value in that, but...
Oh, well.
Well, because people are always like, you should really love your pattern on pattern. And I'm like, but that was 2 years ago. Oh. As soon as I shoot something, I'm bored.
You're ready to move on.
Yeah. So I had them do parkour.
Oh. Did they know how to do it?
They did. They were really good. But it was great. I think of these more as like film stills.
Wow.
But I mean, for me, it was nice to just watch them. There was nothing fake about any of this. They're all good friends in real life. They're having a good time. They're just goofing off. And
well, I guess what I think is also really successful about this group is that the clothes look really terrific. Insane, but terrific.
yeah.
And they're having a good time in them, so they don't feel false somehow. So this is a different series, right?
Yes, so this is another series we just did in Japan. This is outside of Kyoto in the mountains. This is for Departures magazine. It was like a travel story around Japan, and then we would stop in different parts of the country and shoot fashion. So it was actually landscape driven from a travel perspective, and then we brought the fashion in, which I thought was interesting. It was more.
Had you worked in Japan before?
No, it was my first time.
So what were you looking for these kinds of spaces, or did you find things that excited you?
I mean, our trip was curated, so we were going into very historic, ancient places that a lot of people, you wouldn't necessarily be able to photograph, or some places we were led into that like only certain Japanese government officials were able to go into. And it wasn't necessarily a representative viewpoint of Japan now. It was much more of like a historic trip. And
like
kind
a
of
classic kind of.
Yeah, totally. It's funny. I sent out this. Every time I do a new body of work, I send an e-blast. And there's some people on my list that I don't know how they got there. Like I didn't add them. Maybe they added themselves. What have you. And there's a fashion designer that I won't name.
Okay.
That you probably wouldn't know.
Okay.
It's German. Known, but like not. You'd have to know your kind of 90s. Oh my God. Anyway, he was on my list. I have no idea how he got on my list. And I sent out this e-blast with like this picture and one other picture, and he wrote back, "You have to be careful not to be too kitsch."
Oh.
And I wrote back and I was like, "What the hell, man? Like, what are you talking about?" But I mean, I said it a lot nicer. And anyway, we went down this like really horrendous email back and forth. We're just like saying like I've never met this person. I don't know him at all. I have no idea why he would take the time to say that little comment. But then I started re-looking at the pictures through this lens of like, are they kitsch?
Or are they touristic? Or
Yeah, are they touristic? And it, the whole thing was like, our trip was specifically curated by these people that I did. Like, I wasn't picking the locations.
Right.
I was kind of, anyway, you guys be the judge. Kind of turned me off from the whole series.
Wow.
Nice.
So how many of these are published or have been published?
It was a big portfolio. I want to say like 28,
Oh.
something like that, 26.
And was the clothing related to Japanese designers at all, or was it?
Yeah, well, I mean, they
all
have,
over?
they have their advertisers they have to check. And then we had a lot of Japanese designers in there, Japanese stylists,
Okay.
Japanese team, hair and makeup.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah. So that was essentially an edit of Japan.
So, okay, let's just, for this image, how much did you pump up the color on the flowers?
Well, they're not iridescent in real life, but they are
Really?
blue. Yeah. I mean, they are a tone of blue.
But they definitely jump out.
Yeah. I wanted to make them like jellyfish.
Oh.
Yeah. Then this is the new Harper's spread.
Coming after
Yeah.
this, you mean?
Or no, that's in here.
Oh, it's part of this.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
And this was done in London, you said?
Yeah, this is in
around London.
South London at the Ham House. Kind of near Richmond.
That's very Turbeville.
Yeah. I think it's the clothing though too, and
Oh.
the headpiece.
Oh, yeah, I see. But just that sort of soft focus is really nice.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to ask about, looking at this sequence reminded me of Beaton, of certain mid-period Cecil Beaton.
Right.
Does he interest you at all?
No.
No.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know his work so well.
Oh.
He was a photographer that I looked at, put aside.
Because I think there's something, and Beaton and Turbeville sort of meet at a certain point in terms of fantasy, settings, sometimes over the top, but really romance. And there's something that some of your work definitely reminds me of his in that way, that he had a very lush way of looking at the world at different points.
I'll have to look at it again.
I think it would interest you for that reason. Also, I guess I was thinking about how artful your work is, and that often I miss fashion illustration.
Yeah.
And that your work has a kind of a quality of that, of painting or drawing and.
Yeah. Yeah, I love fashion illustration, and on a hierarchy of mediums, you know, I put photography kind of at the bottom. And illustration,
Did everyone hear that?
yeah. Illustration has always been, you know, like I've tried to make my images look like illustrations
No.
in many cases because, again, like I wish I could be an illustrator instead of a photographer, but I can't. So I use,
Yeah, there were things sort of at the end of the sequence of your book that reminded me that had a very illustration quality
yeah,
that I quite like, and it's one of those things I miss in fashion magazines. I wish there would be a place for illustration again.
for sure. Well, the New Yorker,
Yeah,
you guys keep trying to introduce photographs. I don't know why you're doing that.
well, too late to go
Keep
back
it
now.
illustration.
But you know, there was a time when fashion magazines had almost no photography, and there were some great illustrators, and I guess that's also why I think of Beaton,
Yeah.
because he was a great drawer, illustrator for a good part of his life too, and there's I think a lot of crossover.
I'll check them out.
Okay,
Promise.
so I'm wondering whether we should open it up to the audience at
Yeah.
this point, or if there are any questions.
Yeah. I'm gonna.
Talk as loud as you can.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought of it as like, you can get to anybody if you want, you know? It is easy, I think, if you think about it as it being easy.
Well, if
Yeah, so practical example,
your
like,
first example of
how do you, so, okay.
if you just wrote to someone.
Let's say you want to do work with Valentino, right? Where are they based? They're based in Rome. You can go through the press office, which they'll for sure say no. You could go through stylists who have relationships with the press office. You could go to Rome. You could go literally to their office and watch people come out, and maybe they have drinks after work. And you could go to the cafe and you could start a conversation. Oh, you work at Valentino? That's interesting. I mean, there's a million ways. Like, you know, it's the more creative, the better. But I think the problem is that most people probably don't think it's possible. And if you start with that premise, then it's not possible, you know. But honestly, the more annoying you are, like, it kind of better for you in the long term, in the beginning, and then stop being annoying.
As quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But your first example of writing to Anne
Demilmes.
is really, ballsy on one level, but also you did it innocently out of real interest.
Yeah.
And if that's, your way of approaching something, that seems like that's a possibility. And certainly now you have a name, and it makes, you're calling Gucci, and they know who you are.
Yeah.
But at the beginning,
But I mean, yes and no. I think I still think that many people don't know me. Like I think a lot of people know my work, but they don't know me. Like when we called Gucci, it was through the relationship of the stylist at first. Actually, it was through Here's how. I was like, I want to contact Gucci. One of my best friends is the head of PR for Comme des Garçons. She is good friends with that person. I was like, hey, can you introduce me? It was just a process of, But it wasn't like Gucci, they were like, oh my God, Erik Madigan Heck. I'm not Mario Testino or whoever.
Okay.
Someday maybe.
Other questions?
Your first magazine,
Yeah.
How I
Oh.
Thank you. Your first magazine. Can you tell us the name of it?
Yeah, it was called Nominous Quarterly.
Can you tell us how you came to that name?
Yeah. Yeah, so in New York, you have these signs that say no menus. And so the door to my apartment, it had a sign, but it was put together. And every day I would walk in, and it would really piss me off because I had no idea what it meant. And I thought it was Latin because there was no space. And then one day I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's just no menus.
Right.
That's so dumb. I've wasted 6 months of my life trying to figure
Puzzling
out
this out.
what this word is. And I was looking for a name to name my publication. And I was like, that's perfect because, it was that little space that was not there that confounded me and, made me think. And sometimes the most obvious thing is like right in front of you.
It's how I discovered you.
Oh,
I
really?
didn't know it was no menus, and actually I knew this. Now I know the story, but
Yeah.
I wanted you to share it with the audience. But I found the name intriguing and mysterious, and
Yeah.
so romantic. And,
Yeah.
and
It sounds really smart. Like people, it sounds like, oh, that's a literary journal.
I called up a friend, a photographer, and I said, "You have to get with this magazine." And actually, we did arrange for her to be published in your magazine.
Oh, wow.
Eva Ritchie, who shot the blue icebergs in
Oh, yeah, that's
Patagonia,
right.
I sent her to you.
Amazing.
One more question.
Sure.
You say that you prefer shooting in natural lighting. Is
Yeah,
that exclusive? Is that in studio as well?
I only shoot natural light. Yeah, I'm not. I think it might be far stretched, but I think most people like to have it look natural, and I always thought, why not just, use natural light?
So you bring in no equipment in terms of lighting?
I mean, we can have equipment there to make people comfortable. People can get uncomfortable with the fact that you're shooting something with a lot of money behind it and
Right.
you don't have lights.
And you're waiting for the light to get the
I mean, if
ideal
you're
light.
shooting in London in February and it gets dark at 4 o'clock, I'll still shoot natural light. But then if we need to continue on till 7 o'clock,
Sure.
the last 3 hours will be lit.
Okay.
It's not my preference.
Right. Should I pass this on to anybody else?
All right, I guess I have a multi-part question. So it looks like looking at this image behind you, you use a lot of allusion to art history. So that's at least I think that's the joy of life.
Yeah.
Going into a project like that, how much, because it's a large portfolio, do you leave a lot of leeway for yourself to improvise, or do you
Yeah,
have
it's
very
all-
specific? Okay, so you don't have very.
No, I go into every situation having no idea what I'm doing, for the most part.
Okay.
Knowing that the research has come before,
Okay.
These, you can make obvious comparisons to paintings because I've studied art history for half my life. So it's here, but I don't go into, I'm not trying to make that picture necessarily,
Okay. All right.
Generally it's
Excuse me, you don't go in with a mood board
no.
waiting, okay.
I mean, it's kind of
What do you
I
call it?
describe it as being a spy. I kind of wish I was a spy.
Okay.
But it's you get a call, it's we need you in London tomorrow or whatever. You show up in a place, you have your camera.
Mission
you,
Impossible.
Yes, you Mission Impossible, you figure it out. It's here's your location, here's the clothes. You can't, how can you prepare? You're either prepared mentally or you're not.
Okay. And I guess that leads me to the other part was, it seems like you have a very specific idea about the fashion you want to photograph.
Yeah.
What does it look like for you to work with a fashion editor?
Oh, it's a
what's that like?
nightmare.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm just kidding. I have, there's like 4 or 5 stylists that I work with regularly who we have a relationship where they know what I like, but also like they're willing to let me take control sometimes. Yeah, the fashion is either really important or it's secondary to the landscape or to the series. A lot of times for Bazaar, it has to be the forefront because, editorial is still paid in advertising.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Ro. I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with the assistants and like personal team?
Yeah, so my team is me and my everything, which is this guy named Matt. Matt is my digital tech and my retoucher and my studio manager. And just generally, like, he hates me, but he's everything. Like with it, he's like, I'm this arm and Matt is this arm. That's why he's not here tonight. But yeah, I don't do well with a lot of people. Like I pretty much like to do everything, and I like to be involved in every aspect. So assistants, I've tried to have assistants, and it's just not. I reach out to people when I need them, but for the most part, like they're just in the way, because I would have to tell them. Like I'm like, by the time I tell you what to do, I could have done it myself. That sounds rude. I didn't mean it to be, but. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hey, Peter.
Sorry. Just one thing I wanted to touch on, because I know you recently embarked on it, but movie and image, film,
Yeah.
digital, commercials. How do you attack those differently than you attack your still pictures?
So, that's a good question. Can I talk about Gentle Monster? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
No?
No.
For the room, you
Not who's involved.
but not the casting.
Great. These guys
We
are my.
represent Eric, so.
These guys represent me. We just did a big project with somebody that we can't talk about, but it involves.
film- a film
it's
or-
a film. It's a film.
A
And
short.
Yes, short film. This person is a known actor.
Bigger than a bread box?
Bigger than a bread box. And so film to me is very different. I mean, like the way that I would like to think about film is more in film terms as opposed to fashion. I guess fashion film. So, yeah, to answer your question, like when I eat my meal on my plate, I tend to segregate the foods, and I try to. I'm terrible at analogies, but I try to think of like film very separately from photography, and that's what I was saying about black and white photography and color. Like it's easier for me to digest things or mediums when they're kind of pure,
But you still think of color photography as impure?
I mean, come on, second best.
Let's not go there.
Let's not go there.
Okay. I mean, especially, right,
I'm just
your own
I'm
work.
kidding.
I know, I hope so.
No, I mean, like if I do more film, it's going to be more in a very film referential context as opposed to trying to make fashion films, I guess.
Or animating
Yeah,
pictures.
right. Yeah, like I wouldn't want my film work to look at all like my fashion photography
So-
work.
Are there filmmakers that you'd love to be compared to?
Yeah, I love Jonathan Glazer. I think he's amazing.
I don't know who.
Jonathan Glazer. He's great. Look him up.
Okay. I'm writing it down.
Yeah, I mean, I love, Abbas Kiarostami, Krzysztof Kieslowski. You getting these?
No, but go right ahead.
David Fincher,
No.
I still think is one of the greatest American film directors. But again, it's difficult because I am adverse to narrative a lot of time.
Oh,
And so you're just,
that does
You're
make it
just
a
like-
difficult thing.
just destroyed your mind.
Well, there's always abstract film,
Yeah.
but with a unnamed performer, that's probably difficult.
Commercial client.
And a very commercial client.
A
I
little
know.
difficult to carry off, I would guess.
Oh, I think we did a good job. You'll see soon enough.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another question
sorry.
back here.
Do you have like a muse or model face? I know you don't like faces, but do you? I don't know.
Yeah. So Guinevere, she is one of my favorite people to work with, but also because she's from an older generation. She was big in the '90s. She's still relevant, obviously, but I think shooting the older girls, they're able to go into different character roles that, like, naturally and inherently, that it's really hard to find muses now who are young, who are as comfortable as, like, just being themselves, but also taking themselves into these, thinking about it as like an actor would, as opposed to a model.
Mm-hmm.
I find now a lot of models, they're present and then they're like, what do you want me to do? As opposed to finding something inside and actually transforming for you without you having to direct them. And I'm not a good director, Some people are really good at being this. I'm an observer. I always have been. So for me, when I put a girl in front of me, I want them to really find it, as opposed to me telling them what to do.
And is that difficult sometimes?
Yeah, it's extremely difficult. I think most people probably don't enjoy shooting with me until they see, because it's uncomfortable. If you were like, all right, just be.
Be yourself.
It's
But what's that?
it's awkward, but I find that's the only way that I've known how to work. I'm not.
So do you try to work with some of the older models, some of the more experienced models?
Yeah, I've worked with most of them. Kirsty Hume, Audrey Marnay, that whole lot, The only one I think I haven't worked with, to be honest, is probably Kristen McNenemy. But that would be great. It's
Yeah.
no
Yeah,
reason
there's
that
something about the characters of that period that are still really interesting.
Yeah, totally. Even like Kirsten Owen, who now, I think she's like 43, and she still, in my opinion, gets more beautiful every year, But also, like, they come from a different time where it was like, you had to have this presence. Which I don't know.
I would guess that also that was something that the photographers that they worked with valued and sort of, made happen with them,
Yeah.
expected on some level. Are there other questions? Yes?
Well, you told us about collaboration with Gucci.
Yeah.
I want to know more about collaboration with Aganovich.
Oh, with Iganovich.
Aganovich, yeah.
Yeah.
Who is that?
I know you're like really good friends, and these are my favorite designers, so maybe some.
Yeah. Well, actually, we're just going we're shooting the new collection in a couple weeks. So Aganovich, so Aganovich is the young label at Michel Montagnier. So Michel Montagnier started Helmut Lang and then did all the Belgians, Antimil Meester, et cetera, et cetera. And I was in Paris, and a good friend of mine, I was like, hey, I need a new designer to work with. Like, throw me a bone. Who is making clothing that is amazing and like kind of flying under the radar? And they're like, yo, you should check out these guys at Aganovich, they're great. And we met, and we immediately like hit it off and became best friends. And so now we have this ongoing thing every season. Like they actually just came out and stayed with us for a couple days in the country. They're just like, they become like friends. Yeah, I was looking for another word.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and now it's just I used to have that relationship with Mary Catranzu, and we would do, every season, we would do a lookbook, and we'd just make pictures because we wanted to make pictures. And actually, Aganovich this season, in February, upcoming, they're not doing a show. We're only gonna make pictures and then release them to the world that way. So it's exciting. I mean, it's so expensive to do shows too. If you're a young brand, it's like, I don't know how they afford it. Anyway. Oh.
Now, because your rep is also here, I wanted to know how did you find a rep, and like how did you know it was the right one, and a little bit of a story. It's a question actually for both, I guess.
How did I find them?
Yeah.
So, well, do you guys want to?
Long story short.
So, Jimmy Moffitt is he involved in the program? Yeah.
Still, yes.
Yeah.
In
Co-chair, right. So Jimmy.
SVA program.
Right. I don't know if I'm telling this right, you can stop me if I'm not. He helped start this branch of IMG, and I had been speaking to Jimmy for a little while about representation, and it's within IMG, so it's it's a division, that just represents photographers and directors. Anyway, they were starting something new. It wasn't a traditional agency. It wasn't art and commerce. It wasn't our partner. And it's been 8 months. It started just very organically. I mean, historically, I've represented myself. Like I don't know if you guys would say I'm difficult to work with, but I like to do it. I like to do everything, So for me, having an agent for a long time wasn't easy. In the beginning, I had an agent, Stockman Martel, which is very commercial. They didn't really do fashion, and he kind of nurtured me into the world of portraiture and introduced me to Kathy Ryan at the New York Times and Jody Kwan at New York, et cetera. So that's kind of how I started. But then I stopped with them, and I was representing myself for a number of years, which I also really liked. It was just, it got to the point where, so many jobs only come into agencies. And if you're representing yourself, you're also just kind of putting yourself out of the equation at a certain point.
No.
Some photographers later in their careers, I think, have, like David Sims left, the art partner, 3 years ago or 2 years ago. I think there are certain cases of at that scale, where you can do it yourself. You just get a studio manager instead of an agent.
Oh.
But those are few and far between, I think.
Yeah, I would think it would be difficult and better to have someone
out there
stand up for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I stand up for myself.
Clearly.
We have just one more question.
That's right.
I know.
Good segue for that. You said you'd stand up for yourself. Is there clients or jobs you might not take?
Yes. Yeah. I know why you're asking that, by the way. Yeah, so, well, we haven't really talked about ethics, and I know we're at the end of this. Yeah, you're just going to roll your eyes. No, are there clients I wouldn't take? Yes, of course. And are there subjects I wouldn't shoot? Yeah. For example, I wouldn't shoot Donald Trump.
Thank you.
And the reason he's asking is because, you know, a very reputable photographer shot the cover of Time, and which has engaged a lot of us in conversation about, is that appropriate? When is it just a job? Or when do you, as an artist, have a, you know, an ethical responsibility to say no to an assignment? And for me, I feel like that there are certain subjects where you do draw the line and you just say, no, I will not shoot them.
What's another example?
I mean, for a long time, I felt like the Wall Street Journal was a publication I wasn't willing to publish in because it's owned by Murdoch, and it's an extension of, you know, right-wing conservative media.
Right.
And to be honest, like, I don't think it's a place where you can't ethically publish in the Wall Street Journal and then turn around on Facebook and complain about the Republican Party. You know, you become a propaganda extension by publishing, you know. There are certain distinctions like that, I think, at a certain point in your career where they're important. And if, you know, as an artist, you're part of the media spectacle, you have to take responsibility for your actions. But,
That's
yeah,
that's thoughtful. Yes. So, because I tend to be apolitical when it comes to things like fashion magazines.
Yeah.
Especially because I think the Wall Street Journal magazine is quite a good one, because they do get a lot of good photographers.
Yeah.
But I hadn't ever thought of the ethical question, and it's a strong one. You know.
Yeah. I mean, it's the least, I don't know. I mean, but you can make the argument against it. You can say, you know, you're fulfilling a job and it's a hired job. I tend to think that you still need to maintain some sort of boundaries for yourself.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
But that's just me.
So, did you want to make that the last question?
Is there anything you guys want to close with?
There was one person way over
Yeah.
here, but he's been raising his hand
Yeah,
a few
yeah.
times. So let's just make this the last question.
So you seem to have a very, this is for me.
I can hear you though.
Okay. You seem to have a very distinct visual style. Is that something that you found through time, or was it something that was always inside of you?
That's a good question. I think that, yeah, I think I definitely found it through time. You know, in the beginning, you're like anybody. Well, there's a Louis C.K. bit where he's talking about a man on a first date, you know, and he's just like throwing like 20 different personalities at the girl just to like see what will stick, you know? And that's like any young artist. In the beginning, you're like, I like this, and I like this, and I like this, and I'm going to try this. But on the flip side of that, I think for sure there was like a certain style that I had developed as a kid, painting with my mother, that was probably in my head, that took a little bit of time to come out through the photography, you know. But if I look back at my beginning work as a photographer, it was embarrassing. It was like, you would look at a picture and be like, that would be a Sarah Moon. And then there would be a Paulo Reversi picture, and then there'd be this person that I copied. And, you know, that was fine because I was a student and I was trying to figure out what it was. And I think just through time, you know, just you realize what it is you like about certain people, and you take little things, and then over time you start making them your own, you know. But It's like Malcolm Gladwell, didn't you say if you do anything for 10,000 hours or something like that, you'll make it your own? I think he said that.
Okay.
So yeah. Anyway, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.